motivating you to do what you're doing. And I think for probably the vast majority of people, what they value the most, and this could be under the surface, and I think this is why Alex is responding in the way that he is because this is under the surface for him. He values, just like most people, pleasure. He values, and this is also why he objects to the problem of evil, because it involves the opposite of pleasure, which is pain. And so he thinks that's bad, pain, bad, pleasure, good. That's ultimately like his sort of view of the world. And I think this also plays into his view of the problem of evil, which also explains why he's living this the life that he is, and why he's making the decisions that he's making. And again, this is not a critique of Alex per se. This is more along the lines of just getting people. I want everyone watching this to think about what it is that is motivating you to do what you're doing. And I've had to do this too. I've had to really, really, really reflect on why it is that I behave in the ways that I do, why I take certain actions, why I do certain things. And ultimately what it came down to me was focusing on what do I value most in the world? Is it pleasure, or is it something else like virtues? Yeah. And I think people that are drawn to the problem of evil are people that are drawn toward pleasure, as opposed to people that are drawn toward virtue, and that's what they value the most. And if you do value virtue the most, then actually you're going to start to side with Christians on this. You're going to start to see that actually to get those virtues, to cultivate those virtues, it's going to require some suffering. Like, I think it was C.S. Lewis who said that God uses suffering. It's like a megaphone. It wakes you up instead of like just living your life and going about your life, being complacent and being comfortable. Like, pain wakes you up and it gets you to really start to think about yourself. I mean, if you have kids, you know that it can be painful. Yeah. Like, it can be painful to wake up in the middle of the night. Your baby is teething and they're up the entire night, and you're suffering. But what that's doing is it's producing patience. And over time, that starts to build, and you start to build your character, and you start to build these virtues and stuff. So what is most valuable to you? I feel like I'm kind of preaching, but I think that's what Cliff is kind of getting at here. You know, he wants him to really think about this, and Alex, I think, does need to think about this more deeply, especially because it does relate to the problem of evil.
I want to build off of that just a little bit here, and I want to say, it almost seems, my friend Tim Howard and I made this observation. It almost seems like a lot of atheists, when they use the problem of evil, they think the most valuable thing that happens, I might be wrong here, right? But it seems like atheists want to say something like the most valuable thing that happened, that about the reality is what happens to an individual, rather than what that individual does with what happens to them, or what they become after what happens to them. And in the philosophical literature, this is kind of distinguished as the event-centric approach versus the sufferer-centric approach to the problem of evil. And it seems to me the sufferer-centric approach is the right approach, because how that person or agent or animal integrates that suffering into their life is way more important than what actually happens to them. Like, if my son falls off his bike, right, the fall is not the most important thing. The most important thing is the fact that my son retroactively is going to look back at that instant falling of his falling and go, yeah, my life is on the whole good. Like, I'm not permanently destroyed or maimed. Like, I'm okay, and my life is good on the whole. I blah blah blah. You get the point. I'm not going to start preaching here. And it seems to me like you're just ignoring the sufferer in the instance of that. Like, even if you look at the psychological literature and the psychology of meaning making or any of this stuff, what you find is that people that go through some horrific suffering find some of the deepest meaning in their life. And it seems like that's a way more important thing than whatever actually happened to them. If you get what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah. David, any more thoughts before we continue?
Nope.
All right.
No, that's to beg the question. That's precisely the kind of thing that we're trying to discuss here. I don't know how many times I can tell you I'm an agnostic. I don't know how we got here. I don't know how the universe began. I don't know if there's a God. What I do know is that the textual evidence for things like the resurrection in the New Testament is simply not enough to to convince me. For example,
What is enough to convince you that whatever you're living for is true?
I don't know. But for example, the reason I brought up the raising of the dead in Matthew chapter 27 is because, look, this is an argument from silence, but some arguments from silence work. And if you'll allow me to finish this point, you agree that the most extraordinary event in human history was recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. That is that numerous people rose from the dead, walked around the city of Jerusalem, and were seen by many witnesses. That's what we're told. Interestingly, the text is a little unclear because it says that at the time of Jesus' death, the graves opened, and then they appeared to people after the resurrection, implying that there's this 3-day period where they're either laying around in empty graves or hidden somehow. It seems like a bit of a confused text. Now, again, one hypothesis is that this actually happened, and for some reason they were, I guess, like maybe still dead in their graves for 3 days and then they got up or something, and that
This is still just so confusing as a supposed internal critique.
It's terrible as an internal critique. You could, guys, just to be clear, it is relevant if he wants to understand whether this happened, whether this actually happened, what is reported in the Gospel of Matthew actually happened, and if so, what is it that exactly happened? That's a relevant discussion. Whether that, how that is relevant to a debate about whether the God of the Bible exists is very, very strict. You could throw out the entire Gospel of Matthew. You haven't hurt the argument at all that the God of the Bible exists. So anyway, in other words, whatever you conclude about that passage, whether you think it happened or didn't think it happened, and so on, the God that is described in the Bible, does that God exist? Which is what they're debating. No,
Yeah.
I still don't get the
Not a very
discussion.
strong argument.
I want to say one thing too, which is, Alex, I think this is a huge mistake I hear a lot. Alex said something along the lines of like, look, we have this textual data and I find this not convincing of the resurrection.
Yeah.
Look,
you not finding something consistent. I mean, you not finding something convincing is not my criterion of whether I believe something.
Exactly. Alex, you're not the ideal observer. You're not the ideal reasoner. What's important is the textual data that we do have. Is this more expected on the condition Jesus rose from the dead than any of the competing theories? That's what matters. You finding it not convincing isn't really an objection.
All right, I think let's do this. Let's play one more clip. We'll skip forward a little bit in the video. Let me see which one. And this one actually has Stuart talking. So he claims that atheists have a much bigger problem in explaining their moral outrage, which I think is going to kind of summarize a lot of what we've been talking about in the stream. So that's one of the find here. All right.
Commands the Hebrew armies to do. And it's obviously why. We know why. Because it's for victory in battle. Now, God...
So they're talking about...
Yeah, he's talking about the hamstring of the horses here. Can I just really want to say this. What Phil is saying, Phil is wanting to imply that this is about taking down the enemy's horses.
Well, explain the passage really quickly for people that didn't watch the debate.
Yeah. So there's I don't remember right off the top of my head, but there's a passage in one of the Old Testament war texts where the Israelites are supposed to hamstring the horses of the enemies, right? Phil wants to say the purpose of this is just for military warfare purposes, but that's not actually what's happening in the text. What's actually happening in the text is a subversive thing to war. In other words, time and time again, what you see in the Old Testament is God actually telling the Israelites to not take certain weapons, not use certain weapons, and not use horses or chariots in their battles. And so the whole point of what is happening here is this is God's way of saying, no, you can't use these because you're not winning these wars through weapons and all these means of these other kings and nations around you, Israel. You're going to win these wars through covenant fealty.
His hair is gorge. I love him so much. She's like the luckiest girl in the world. Get off the phone. You have to come see what's on the news. I gotta go, babe. Mom's getting jelly. Love you. Late. Okay. See you later. Call me.
We are psychos, man. Man for himself. New York ain't the same. Die. Screw that. Just taking what I can get.
Finally! Oh, thank you so much. That was terrifying. No, I need to get the hell out of here.
Sweetheart, you must have had your spinach today, is all I can say. I hear those nice people are coming back all safe and sound. I'm gonna make them a nice tuna sandwich when they get back here.
Best of luck
Keep
out
it
there.
up. Last Man Battalion's been moving in on the Russian consulate.
To me, now there's a whole huge backdrop here, but all I want to get to, the thing I really wanted to point out here is what Phil is saying here is not true, is not correct, and by my assessment of the textual data. It seems that this is actually a subversive thing to war in which the Israelites are commanded to do something because they're not supposed to use what modern day's equivalent of tanks would be in the ancient Near East.
Okay.
That's what's going on here.
You just saved my
All right,
life.
let's listen to this clip where Stuart comes back in though with his response.
Easily taught them how to use tranquilizers. He could have teleported the horses elsewhere. He could have just put them to sleep for a few hours during the battle. But no, he commanded this torture. Right? Now, if that doesn't convince you that this God is not perfectly good, what would?
Well, I just continue to rely on my favorite intellects over there where you guys are. And C.S. Lewis would answer, yes, there's a problem emotionally for me when it comes to this issue. But there's a greater problem for the atheist agnostic in explaining this type of moral outrage they have over this issue. So we both have problems. I'm not going to say, oh, this is an easy one. And I'm not going to say this is let's just turn it into a page turner. No, there's true issues here, but I defer to C.S. Lewis, and I think Alex should as well, when saying that you still have a bigger issue than me in answering this question when it comes down to where is this ultimate moral outrage coming from? It's just your own subjective opinion.
I would like to know...
So why try and...
So I actually want to give an analogy that I promised at the beginning of the stream that I think is going to help outline what Stuart is kind of getting at here. So suppose that we there's a team on Antarctica that is drilling for ice cores, okay? And in one of these ice cores that happens to be like 50,000 years old or something along those lines, that we find a Rolex watch is frozen in that ice core. What is the explanation? What is the explanation of this watch being in an ice core that is 50,000 years old? One explanation is that it was put there by humans somehow, okay? That's one explanation. Now that explanation has problems. Why is a human putting a watch in an ice core that is 50,000 years old? Why is a human putting that there? There doesn't seem to be much reason to be putting it there. Maybe another hypothesis would be that someone time traveled and left it there on accident. Okay, there's problems with that because is time travel even possible? Right? That's a problem. There's a problem with that hypothesis. Now compare that to the hypothesis that the watch arose by chance. What's going to be more likely? That a human put it there, which there's problems with that hypothesis, versus that it arose by chance. Still, the human put it there hypothesis is way on a number of magnitudes higher, probabilistically, than the chance hypothesis. Like naturalistic chance. Somehow the elements came together from different parts of the universe, somehow combined into this, thing that looks like a watch, has a Rolex logo on it and stuff, and just, happens like.
But Cameron,
so
I'm agnostic as to the question of how the watch got there.
You are.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, guys, that's
You're
that's
way
kind
too
of
intelligent.
that remark from Than right there is if you didn't understand what we were talking about earlier, perfect example. You have a watch. It's in a chunk of ice. It's been there for 50,000 years. It's a Rolex. Any hypothesis you put forward about how a human being put it there, whether it's time travel or inventing some teleportation device that teleported it there, or whatever you want to come up with, there are going to be problems with your hypothesis. You're going to say, does that really make sense? And you could attack whatever hypothesis you come up with. That doesn't change the fact that the hypothesis that a human being put that there is massively, massively, massively more probable and by far a better explanation than the idea that it just arose by chance and all the parts came together. And so that's kind of what we're dealing with. You're dealing with an atheist saying, oh, but that explanation doesn't make sense. A time travel, how do we know that time travel? How do we know that someone may have invented a teleportation device? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, I can grant that you can raise all kinds of objections. It's still massively more probable than any alternative you have, unless you can show me a better alternative that doesn't involve a human being. If so, I'm waiting. Oh, I'm just an agnostic. Okay, but then you're not showing me that there is a better explanation than the explanation that a human being did it. And so you can apply the same reasoning here. What kind of good God would do this or order that? On what basis do you, as an atheist, say that God couldn't command you to do that to every animal on the planet? What basis? The moment you're saying no, there are these rules that God could not violate, and God would have to do this, and God would have, you're now in the realm of theism, asking about God's reasons for doing things, rather than saying you have a better explanation, because what you're saying does not fit with your worldview. How would you know what God would have to do? How would you have access? How would you, as whatever it is you believe you are on naturalism, namely a machine for propagating DNA that just became smarter than other machines for propagating DNA, why would you think that you have access to these universal rules that even God would have? So now what you're doing is you're in the realm of arguing about what God would do and what God's reasons might be, but you have not shown that you have any sort of better explanation, because nothing that you're saying or doing actually makes sense.
Right. The chance hypothesis is not a better explanation than the human hypothesis.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to some super chats now, and if you guys do have to head out, just let me know. Otherwise, we'll try to keep this to around 15-20 minutes, and then we'll close out the stream. All right, DFW Kirby says Alex's philosophy 101 arguments were excusable when he was a freshman undergrad, but now it's bordering pathetic. Thanks for calling him out. Yeah, some of these arguments, yeah, I would like to see some more progress on Alex's part. Like, at least interact with the stuff that's being pointed out, right? Like, at least do that. Even if you disagree, that's fine. But interact with the stuff that's being said to you in response. All right, next one. Isa Kabir says, in many of these debates, the opponents don't actually understand Christian theology and don't fairly represent nor steelman the Christian perspective. Yeah, I think that unfortunately does happen quite a bit.
Yeah.
Sheeny Beanie says,
We
at this
need
point,
more like
Dawkins
you.
has to be a plant from the Christian evangelical complex to bring atheists to Christ. If that is the case, keep going, Richie. Marky Young, wait, but Alex's point was actually initiated by Phil. Animals suffered before the fall, according to his assumption. Watching this live late. Sorry. So I'm not really sure what that's in response to.
Maybe like in the beginning of the stream where we were pointing out that it's not really a problem that if there was animal suffering before the initial like Adam and Eve fall.
Yeah, we also talked about in other falls, though, fall of angels and stuff, how that might still apply. So, and then we also talked about other theodicies, like the soul builder theodicy, the gnomic regularity theodicy and stuff. So, yeah, maybe he just came a little bit late. All right, let's move on. Amazing, skeptical, rational, cosmic, free-thinking atheist says, haha, it is 2024 and we're still debating this. This is proof that theists have no idea what their sky daddy wants. I learned everything on our atheism.
That's Reddit. And you can see it's an AP fan.
Yeah. All right, Moroni says, a numbness of spirit is being dead or asleep. Agnosticism over lifetime is the same as atheism. I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd agree with that.
Nick says, Merry Christmas to all. Merry Christmas to you, brother or sister. I don't know many Nicks that are female, but
that's Australian dollars, so we don't know what they do with names down there.
True. Magellan says, Alex...
Nick could be the Australian short version of Nicole, for all we know.
Magellan says, Alex destroyed Cliff, obliterated. So I will say that Cliff had, there were points, and we didn't go over the whole debate. Obviously, it would have been, the stream would have been 15 hours long. But I think ultimately Alex and Phil probably won this debate in the end. But I do think that Cliff and Stewart raised some good points. Okay, and that's kind of what we covered here. They do need a little bit more credit than they were given on in the comments of this video. So they didn't do as terrible a job as a lot of people are claiming. All right, Magellan also says that debate was embarrassing for the theists. All right, Magellan. Have you been listening to anything else that we said?
No, theist humiliated. Theist God. Theist God. We fought. We fought.
They are the brights. They are the brights. Video Mania says Alex is as disingenuous as any atheist out there. I hard disagree.
We all disagree with that, right? Yeah.
Hard disagree. Yeah. No, he's very intellectually honest. I think he was using some debate tactics in this one that worked in his favor. So, Emerson says, donating only cause the dawn is here. David Wood, the Godfather. Thank you. All right, we got through these actually relatively quickly. Whoa, Bo. Cameron, you should react to Frank Turek and Alex O'Connor.
Bayesian ontological argument. Now I just need to come up with what WHOA stands for. Whoa,
nice. Whoa, boa. I think that Frank puts him in his place that O'Connor can't escape. You know what? I'm actually in talks right now of scheduling a new in-person debate with these two fellas. Possible, we don't know, we got to work out the details and stuff, but it is a possibility. I should react to the Frank Turek and Alex O'Connor clip. It's been a while since I watched that. I'm not a huge fan of the traditional
Did they
moral
debate
argument.
or something?
They debated
A really
years
long
ago,
time
I think,
ago.
the moral argument. And yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the traditional moral argument. I like arguments for moral knowledge a lot better.
Yeah.
So Frank and I might actually disagree on that one. But I mean, Alex, he normally does like a really good job in his debates. So I'd probably have to give him some props if I did a review of that. But all right, Gabriel says, where can we get David's dissertation?
You can go to the Fordham Library website. I think they have all the dissertations there that have ever been approved.
Oh, nice.
I mean, I could just email it to you, but I normally don't like just. I wish there were someone else who would just email it to anyone, because I'm terrible with emails and stuff, and then I feel like if I start emailing it out, then other people are going to ask me to email it to them, and then I'm going to be spending emails all the time. Anyway, I think you can access it through the Fordham University Library somehow.
All right, last one. Wayne Cochran says, how culpable are Christians that embrace young earth creationism for causing a stumbling block for those searching for Christ and dismiss it? I think it depends on whether or not they are sincere, right? Because you can sincerely mislead people like on accident, you know, and I don't know that you would necessarily be culpable for that, depending on how much research you've done, whether or not you've been intellectually serious about investigating your own beliefs and stuff. Because I'm sure that a lot of us have beliefs that are false, doctrinal beliefs that are false, that we nevertheless think are true, and we're trying to convince other people that are true. So it wouldn't just be young earth creationism that faces this problem. I think it would apply more generally.
I think the other angle of this too would be the dogmatic nature of your belief in any of those places too. Like when I first became a Christian, one of my biggest struggles was people dogmatically telling me I had to be a young earth creationist, and that led me into like a stage of agnosticism until I realized kind of how modular Christianity actually is. So had it not been for the dogmatic position of some people there, I don't know that it would have caused the stumbling block. So I think that attitude is important there, probably for the culpability as well.
As far as how it would become a stumbling block, if you have someone who is completely opposed to a certain position and thinks it's insane, and then you present that position that these other people regard as completely insane as a foundational claim of Christianity, that if you deviate from it, you can't possibly be a Christian, then it's, I'm not deciding whether to be a Christian based on whether Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead. It's this other thing that I have to accept first. If you're presenting that as the only possible way to become a Christian or something like that, then if someone actually believes you, because they don't know that they're actually there's actually a range of views within Christianity
What do you honestly
itself.
think you'll achieve
If they
with it?
think that is the only
lockdown is a
position of
necessary
Christianity, and they think that's
precaution to
insane.
control the situation. We have enough to handle as it is.
But what are you doing to let people pass through? Most people just want to leave the city to meet with their family.
We will reevaluate the relocation plan at some point, but for now, the lockdown holds. Now, miss, I've got work to do here. You really should stop looking for trouble and make sure your own family is safe.
Insane, then they're not going to listen to your claims about Jesus dying on the cross for sins and rising from the dead, because they think, oh no, well, it's completely insane from the ground up. So yeah, it's kind of how you present it. If you hold to that position, it should be, hey, Jesus died on the cross for sins, rose from the dead. He's Lord. We need to submit to him. That's the gospel. Oh, and there are different views on this. I think I'm right about this, and here's why I think I'm right. That's, if you wanted to present it, that's how it should be presented, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing I'm going to say, and then we'll close out. So, David, there was something I wanted to say way earlier on, and I just forgot. Basically, there is an objection to the problem of evil that I've been thinking about lately that has made me basically completely stop taking atheism seriously. Okay, like, because the problem of evil is
you heard it here, Cameron, from a couple months ago. took atheism very seriously. Okay. Just wanted to point that out.
I took it seriously for years. I'd be happy to say that. Yeah, I took it seriously for years, thinking it was a serious alternative and stuff.
It was the bell curve.
It's the bell curve. It's the bell curve. But okay, so the realization that occurred to me, and this was actually after talking with Philip Goff. Do you know who Philip Goff is? Have you heard of him? Okay, so he's a philosopher. I actually interviewed him on my channel recently. He calls himself a heretical Christian. He just converted from agnosticism to a heretical form of Christianity. But anyways, so he's got a version of theism of like a limited God. So not the unlimited, perfectly good, perfectly powerful, perfectly omniscient. He actually just limits one property that God has, his power. Okay, and he does that so that he can avoid the problem of evil. And this is one of the reasons that he calls his view heretical, is because he doesn't hold that God is omnipotent. So this is a version of theism that one can adopt. Clearly one can adopt this. Philip adopts this version of theism. If you adopt this version of theism, the problem of evil has no purchase. You're still holding that God is perfectly good, omniscient even, but just not perfect, like not all powerful. Okay? And this, so basically the point is that there are other versions of theism besides the one that most people hold, right? And the atheist, if you want to say the problem of evil is an argument for atheism, you have to show that it rules out not just one concept of God, because atheism is the view that there are no gods, not a single God. Like, atheism is not compatible with the view that there's a creator of the universe, right? There's a non-physical mind that created the universe and fine-tuned it and stuff. Like, that's not atheism. And so the problem of evil, though, is only targeted at one version of theism. It's targeted at perfect being theism. And so anyways, that realization, it really struck me. I wouldn't say recently, but in just thinking through Philip's version. I don't subscribe to it because I think there are really good responses to the problem of evil. Philip thinks that there aren't good responses to the problem of evil, so that this leads him to adopt a God of limited power. But I think there are really good responses to the problem of evil, so I'm not too concerned about needing to make this move. But basically, this move that Philip has made me realize that actually atheists got a lot more work to do if they want to establish that atheism is true. Mm-hmm. So everything that we've said, add on this, and then what does the atheist have left? Because the problem of evil is like the number one thing that they talked about in this debate. They talked about some Old Testament passages and stuff, and all of that is, we can get into the weeds of those things if we want to, but the main thing that they want to get to, and what Alex I think is also like really what's going on with Alex is it's not the Old Testament text for Alex, because if we could work through all of those, really it's about the problem of evil for Alex. But this response, like I don't know what they can do.
Yeah, so I mean, that's gonna sound weird to Christians, talking about a God who's not all powerful or something like that. But the takeaway there is, so suppose you read the Bible, you understand what Christianity claims, and you conclude that there is no serious, legitimate response to the problem of evil. That doesn't give you atheism. At most, it should cause you to rethink what you mean by God's attributes. So that's the basic idea, right? It's like, oh no, I've rejected this, therefore this. No, therefore modify your view of that, because that is beyond ridiculous. And I mean, it's basically I'm a Christian. I believe in God and the attributes we normally ascribe to God. If for some reason I concluded that there's something wrong, atheism's not on the table even as a serious alternative. It would, I might like if I concluded that this argument is just airtight, which I couldn't. There are tons of problems with it, and it's just interesting that all of the earlier versions of the argument end up getting rejected at point, even by defenders of the argument. So the logical argument from evil, even though that for centuries that's the go-to argument, then actually this argument is lame and we need to reject it. And then they turn to this inductive argument, and then that goes for a while. And even the guy who popularized it, he eventually, no, there's actually a problem with it. Let's go in a different direction. Let's make it a Bayesian argument and so on. They're acknowledging that there can be there can be problems with the argument of evil in whatever form you take. And I did my dissertation on the Bayesian version of the argument. Trust me, guys, there are all kinds of problems with the Bayesian argument from evil in any of the forms that I've seen. So there are problems with the argument. So the point is, there's never going to be a situation where I just say, oh man, I see no problem with this argument, and this argument is airtight. It refutes a God with these attributes. But if that did happen, the conclusion would not be therefore atheism or something like that, or even that Christianity is therefore false. Okay, some of these verses that we interpret as omnipotence, implying omniscience and omnipotence and something, maybe we need to revise our understanding of that, because it's atheism. If you're talking about atheism in the strong sense of no God, no creator, anything else, it's always once you start looking at the evidence and assigning probabilities, it is by far the weakest, the absolute weakest position. In other words, I'll go ahead and say this, ladies and gentlemen. If the alternatives, you guys know what I think about Islam. If the alternatives were Islam or atheism, I would take Islam in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. It wouldn't even be close. It wouldn't even be close. Why? Islam can answer all these big questions. Islam has lots of problems. But Islam can answer the big questions. Atheism just can't. It can't do it. It's not even in the right ballpark. So if the only two alternatives on the table were atheism and Islam, I would Islam in a heartbeat. Guys, it's not even close. And you guys know what I think about Islam. So that should tell you what I think about atheism. Anyway, the long story short, there, guys, we have a ton of evidence. Atheism does a crap job of accounting for any of the evidence, but it thumps its chest loud enough to we've got all the evidence on our side, and it's ridiculous.
Makes a lot of bombastic claims,
but within Christian theism, you have a lot of room for disagreements on interpretation. You have lots of room for rethinking various issues and for trying to figure out who's right and so on. What you don't ever want to do is say, here's something I don't get, or this kind of doesn't make sense, therefore throw the entire thing out. Because as Cliff and Stuart were pointing out, actually, until you come up with a better explanation, and atheism definitely isn't it, and Islam isn't it, none of that, until you come up with a better explanation for the way things are, we're sticking with this in spite of your objections.
Anything to add, Than? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and...
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks, David. Thanks, Than, for joining me. Go check out Than's channel, Exploring Reality. I want you guys to go check out, if you liked what you heard from Than, go check out Exploring Reality, and then obviously go subscribe to David's channel as well, Apologetics Road Show. And what's the other one? Something Polemics.
There's Act 17 Polemics as well.
Act 17 Polemics. When's the next video on that one coming out?
On Act 17 Polemics?
Yeah.
Well, that's not my channel. I've actually recorded multiple videos with Brother Rashid for that channel that I haven't sent over, but it's whenever I send some videos over.
Interesting. All right. Well, appreciate you guys joining me, and thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and all the things.